Welcome back everybody, welcome back to Human Act and this short video course. Today I've chosen more specifically to talk about facilitation. As CRM trainers, human factors trainers, it's kind of been drummed into our heads from day one that facilitation is probably the most important art to master if we are going to be successful in bringing important messages across to the crews that we train and, of course, creating learning. At the same time, I think I can speak for myself. As an experienced trainer, I have sometimes found myself in situations that I found difficult to handle, perhaps even difficult to know how to deal with the difficult students, and maybe even strayed a little bit from classic facilitation principles. Today, I will share an example that taught me so much as a trainer myself, and I will share with you the secret to two of my very simple facilitation tools. I call these the power of the pen and the power of hands. But before we get there, let's start in a different place. Now imagine that this is your tiny baby boy. For the weekend, you've prepared a getaway for yourself and your other half. You've already booked a hotel in a luxury spa resort at the seaside. You really want to spoil him or her. This also means that, of course, you'd want someone to look after your baby boy. Unfortunately, after having asked everyone in your family and everyone in your immediate circle of friends, it turns out that nobody's actually able to help this weekend. So what you do is look up on the internet and you find a very well-renowned babysitting agency. Now, the agency has two very clear rules. The first rule is that they'll send you 4 pictures of 4 different babysitters. The second rule is you cannot choose who you want to look after your child, but they do allow you to exclude one of the pictures. So the question is, who do you not want to look after your baby? Now, these are the 4 pictures that are available to you, so have a think now and think about which of these 4 people would you not want looking after your baby. What I normally do when I have trainers on a Train the Trainer course in a physical classroom is I display a picture of these 4 people on the slide. I then instruct people to just have a talk in pairs and agree on which person they would exclude. Now, at this point, you may be wondering, what on earth has this got to do with facilitation? And I don't blame you. What I do at this stage is I simply make a line on the flip chart like this, and I place the words neutral to judgmental at the other end, and then ask people. So when you were talking, when you were making up your mind and agreeing on which person to exclude, where on the line would you place yourselves from neutral to judgmental? Now, the answer here is quite obvious, that it is quite judgmental to eliminate a person simply based on a picture on a PowerPoint slide. This brings me to the next question. Getting back to the line, I usually ask people, as a CRM trainer or facilitator, where on the line would you like to be? The general consensus seems to be here that people point to somewhere to the left of the middle towards neutral. So what can we do then to appear more neutral and less judgmental and more open to our students? This is where I'd like to get to the first tool I'd like to share with you. I call this the power of the pen. What the power of the pen actually means is very, very simple. Write down on the flip chart what your students say, not what you heard. Whether you agree or disagree to it doesn't matter. I stick with the principle of putting it down no matter what. Until one day I found myself in a situation that I found really, really difficult to handle. Just to give you a bit of background information about the story, I had been hired to undertake an operator's conversion course for an operator. Now, this company had just recently been overtaken by another company. So this meant changed working routines, changes in working conditions, and reduction in pay, which to many, of course, creates a lot of uncertainty and perhaps also a bit of animosity. I knew this in advance, so I made sure to arrive early. I set everything up in the classroom and people start to arrive. As a trainer, the first thing I usually do is ask people to introduce themselves. It quickly turns out that out of the 19 people, 16 are pilots and the remaining 3 are people from the top management. Anyway, I start my course by talking about company culture and start with a classic question. So at this point in time, what words would you use to describe the company culture in this company? And of course, I get words such as professional, efficient, organized, on-time performance. And I also get words such as a bit uncertain, a little bit stressful, not knowing what's going to happen. I make sure, of course, to stick with my principle of the power of the pen and list the words exactly as people have said them. Then I get to a person who is sat at the back of the classroom, leaning back, his arms crossed, raising his hands, saying, arrogant management. Arrogant management. Now, I remember quickly looking through the classroom, 16 pilots who seemed like they were more or less at war with the company, and then 3 people from top management. So 19 pairs of eyes with different agendas staring at me. What now, Jesper? Now, I don't remember much, but the only thing I remember is some part of my subconscious brain telling me, just stick with your principle of the power of the pen and write down what people say. So this is what I did. I said, okay, arrogant management, thank you for that. I'll put that on the flip chart. Now, every single bone in my body wanted me to stop and ask the person to comment on that, but I didn't do that. I didn't give him a chance to comment. I didn't ask him to elaborate. In other words, I didn't give him the attention that he was probably looking for. We continued the course, and as always, I like to reserve plenty of room for a proper summary that helps us to consolidate the learning points from the course. For that purpose, I usually use the flip chart pages that we've made throughout the day. And of course, during the summary, I get to this particular page with the word arrogant management. So I said to my students, this is what we talked about this morning, your words on how you would describe the company culture in this company at present. I'll just give you a moment in silence to look at the words and tell me whether they are suitable for us to conclude that this is actually the culture. What can you imagine happened? Well, there was a female who raised her hand, and her words were, I think the words are fairly accurate. However, though, the wording, arrogant management, I don't really think that's fair. That's a bit harsh. Now, that triggered other reactions and a couple more people nodding their heads saying, in agreement, we don't think this is fair. And I said, I can't even remember who came up with this. And the guy in the corner raised his hand and said, well, it was me. I had a bit of a rough start to the day. I was in a bad mood this morning. But yeah, maybe it's a bit harsh. Okay, would you like to change it? What would you like to do with it? And he thought for a brief moment. He said, you can cross it out. I said, okay, you want to cross it out? Are you sure? Yes, just cross it out. I didn't mean it. This moment was an extremely important learning point for me. To be very honest, I cringed at the thought of having to put the word arrogant management on the flip chart, especially given that I had people from top management in the classroom. What I've realized is that this is my job as a facilitator. I am here to facilitate opinions, thoughts, and experiences. I'm not here to pass judgment on anybody. Rather, it's my job as a facilitator to remember that in a classroom, we've got people with their own learnings, their own memories, their own experiences, and lots of knowledge. A bank of knowledge and experiences that by far supersedes any instructor's bank of knowledge. And that's something I feel is really, really important to remember. Another thing I learned is that if I just stick with the principle of writing things down, then the likelihood is that the group dynamics will take care of it by themselves. That someone in the classroom will raise their hand and say, I don't agree with this. And that enables you to set off a discussion which is far more productive than you giving the answers yourself. Lastly, I would like to underline another important point, that just because you as a facilitator put up the word arrogant management or a word like that doesn't mean that you agree to it. Those are the words of your students, not yours. So this is what I mean by the power of the pen. It requires a bit of ice in the stomach to use at times, but it's very simple to use and it works every time. The second tool I'd like to talk about, I call the power of hands. Now, it's actually not my own invention. I owe all the credit to Alan Peace. Alan Peace is an Australian expert in body language and gestures, and he's also a very experienced presenter himself. Alan Peace conducted a small but very powerful experiment. He wanted to see to what extent people's perception of him as a presenter would change simply depending on how he used his hands. So he set out to do 3 different presentations that were almost identical. They have the same contents, the same wordings, he used the same body language, and he would use the same pace. The only thing that he would change from the first to the second to the third presentation was the way that he used his hands. In the first of the 3 presentations, he used a lot of pointing fingers. Now in the second presentation, he changed that, so he would use a lot of palm down movements or closed hand movements, meaning that his fingers were closed. Now in the third scenario, or the third presentation, he used a lot of open hand movements. After each of the 3 presentations, Alan Pease asked every single person in his audiences to rate him on a scale from 1 to 5. Now, if we go to the open hand movements, a staggering 84% of the audience awarded him a 5-star rating. For the palm down or closed hand movements, that number dropped to 52. And as for the pointing finger presentation, only 28% of the audience gave him a 5-star rating. This may not come as a surprise, but it does transmit important messages about just how sensitive the subconscious mind are to these signals and the messages that we bring across. So, to you as a CRM trainer or human factors facilitator, just how aware are you of these small signals and the messages that they send across to your students? So these were the 2 facilitation tools I wanted to discuss today. They are, as you can probably see, very easy to practice, and they can help you fine-tune your own delivery style so that you can appear increasingly neutral, which is a key component in gaining the trust needed to get real discussions in the classroom. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Stay tuned for more videos on humanact.com.